Hello. In today's explainer, we're going to be delving into a really troubling modern phenomenon. We're looking at that hidden link between certain online subcultures, a growing sense of loneliness, and how this digital world can, tragically, spill over into real-world violence.
You know, this one line from the fictional Netflix drama Adolescence just perfectly captures this huge cultural and generational gap. It shows how these dangerous online worlds can hide right in plain sight, disguised by a language and a set of references that most parents would find completely baffling.
So we're going to use the themes from this series as a kind of lens to help us unpack what's going on. Now, the story is, of course, fictional, but it's incredibly well-researched. It's grounded in a very real and, frankly, very urgent social issue.
Okay, so let's get into it. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with those warning signs from Adolescence, then we'll decode the language of what's called the Incelosphere. After that, we'll look at its core ideas, put it all into a wider social context, and then finally, connect the dots from online anger to real-world violence.
Right, first up, let's explore how that drama so effectively shows the profound difficulty that parents face in even recognizing the powerful and often quite insidious influence that these online communities can have on their children.
The term itself, incel, gets right to the heart of the core grievance that fuels this whole subculture. We're talking about a group that really grew after the awful 2014 Isla Vista attack by Elliot Rodger, whose entire motivation was rooted in this deep sense of sexual frustration and rejection.
So let's now look at how this personal grievance builds into an entire worldview, one that comes with its own unique language and a very rigidly perceived social structure.
And you have to understand, this isn't just one website. The Incelosphere is a whole network of forums and social media spaces that create a really powerful echo chamber, constantly repeating and reinforcing these ideas among all its members.
Now, central to this entire worldview is what they call the 80-20 rule. And for them, this isn't just a casual thought. It's seen as a fundamental, unchangeable law of nature. It's the bedrock of the entire social hierarchy they've built to explain their lives.
This slide here really lays out that rigid social structure quite clearly. At the very top, you have the so-called Chads and Stacys, the genetically blessed, if you will. In the middle, you've got the normies, that's most of society, and then right at the bottom is where they place themselves, the incels, who believe they are permanently locked out of the system because of how they look.
This rigid hierarchy then leads to a really critical ideological concept, one that's famously borrowed, as you might guess, from popular culture.
So for members of this subculture, taking the red pill means waking up to what they believe is reality, the harsh truths of that hierarchy we just saw. Being blue-pilled, on the other hand, means you're living in a delusion, believing in quaint ideas like romance or that personality matters more than genetics. But the show Adolescence didn't actually mention an even darker, more final extension of this idea. And this is really where the ideology takes a particularly troubling turn. The crucial point about the black pill is that it represents a complete turn towards nihilism. It says that their place in the hierarchy isn't just real, it's a permanent, unchangeable genetic fate. There's no way out. And it's this sense of utter hopelessness that so often links this idea to discussions of suicide within the community. Now, it's really important to understand that this isn't happening in a vacuum. This ideology is taking root at the same time as some pretty significant shifts in how young people are living, how they're connecting with each other, and how they think about the world.
And this chart here shows one of those key shifts. We're seeing data from all over the world that consistently points to this growing political gap in Gen Z, with young men generally trending more conservative and young women more liberal.
This is all happening as young people are spending more time online than any generation before them, with many of them saying they feel always connected. But the paradox is, all that connection, especially on social media, seems to be contributing to higher rates of loneliness and that fear of missing out, or FOMO.
And all of this brings us to the most concerning outcome, that potential link between this isolated online world and actual acts of real-world violence. What's really notable is a change in the nature of some extremist violence. The perpetrators are often younger, and they don't really fit into those traditional ideological boxes. Instead, it seems they're grabbing ideas they find online to frame and justify their own personal grievances. The 2021 Plymouth attack is a key example. The official inquest found the motive was personal, but the data showed the attacker was completely steeped in the incelosphere.
So researchers are now looking at this as a kind of interrelated triad of influences. It's a dangerous cocktail, really. You take increased online time and loneliness, you mix it with exposure to extreme ideas, and then you use that ideology to frame and justify deep personal frustrations. And this leaves us with a critical and incredibly difficult question for our society. When someone's personal pain gets filtered and amplified through an online ideology of grievance, how do we ever learn to tell the difference between a cry for help and an emerging threat?